and kind of using their faith as this way of absolving their sins. Do you think that if the mosque, the leaders in the mosque, leaders in the Muslim community took more of an active role in making sure that we educate our youth properly in regards to drug abuse, in regards to gang culture, that this problem wouldn't become as big as it is now?
I think the education needs to be twofold. I think that it does to some extent need to come from the mosques as well, but they're at school for up to 9 hours a day, and you've got to question where they are for a significant proportion of their day. If they're there for 9 hours and they're not getting that education from there, or they're not getting the right mentoring from there, they're not getting the right kind of information from there, then we have to question that. In terms of them praying on Fridays to absolve their sins, you know,
and I'm not just talking about, I'm not just singling out this community. I mean, we have somebody, we'll be speaking to different people of different faith, and I think a lot of young people especially are misguided in what it means to be a practicer or practitioner of your religion or of your faith. They think that if they do it on the holy day, then everything else that they do during the week is really not accountable.
That's down to ignorance, and that's something that we all have to work towards in terms of informing our young people, so that they can make the right choices. If they're saying they're practicing and they're doing that, you know, what we have to do is get in to speak to them. I work for an organisation where we work with youth inclusion projects and youth offending teams as well. So we'll go there and deliver a session a week in 3 different locations, and whilst we're there, we're discussing these issues. So rather than waiting for them to come to the mosque, we're actually going out there and visiting them. And I think that we need to encourage that kind of behaviour a bit more in terms of the outreach work. But I do stress that the onus on this should be brought on how we can all meet up as a community and actually, you know, resolve this problem. And I think that that's where you're working across the boundaries of the public sector and the voluntary sector, and working together to actually deliver something which has, you know, a monumental effect on.
Right. Do you think if we, you know, there's such a stigma obviously attached to drug abuse and being part of gangs and gang violence and all of that, that even youths that are, you know, affected by this or are involved in this, they're afraid to seek help just because of what the rest of the community will say? Do you think that if perhaps we open up the lines of communication between teachers and students, parents, and youths and people in the community, that this might help solve this problem a little bit?
Yeah, I think you can help it, but parents and teachers, people don't really like talking to them because they can always, I don't know, it's hard to talk to your parents and your teachers. It's more people in the community, people that you know, people that you see at the mosque, you see in the shops.
Would you be afraid to go to somebody in your local mosque or somebody in your community and say, look, you know, I'm addicted to this drug, or you know, I'm abusing alcohol? Would you be afraid that it would get out?
Yeah, it probably would, because they think they're doing their best. They're doing their best to help you. They're trying to help you, but they actually make it worse. It's better when you've got someone you can relate to, someone not much older than you, someone who's used, someone who's been through it. They can actually help you more, and they will not say anything about it.
I'm sure you'll both agree that, you know, we did speak to people that were users, used previously. We invited them to come on and share their experiences, because obviously the best way to learn is from somebody else's experience. And because of this taboo, because of the stigma, they were reluctant to come on TV and discuss this openly. Altaf, do you see that changing?
I don't see it changing. I think that, you know, it's something that we as a community kind of like bury our heads in the ground when it comes to discussing issues such as drugs and some of the ones that you've listed on the back. But it is time where we need to come out and speak about these issues in an open fashion, but one where we consider the cultural sensitivity towards these issues as well. And once we are aware of the cultural sensitivities, that's when we can discuss it. Because up until then, we're basing, you know, we're analysing the reaction of a particular community, and I mean this as an Asian community, based upon something which is alien to it. And thus we need to understand the Asian community first before we can actually start to deliver a tailored service. So like Salma was saying before about her cultural sensitive program in her ward, it's one of those where we've understood the community and then delivering a specialized service.
It is so prevalent. Drugs are prevalent within the Asian community. It's not isolated cases where, you know, you hear somebody smoking weed and you think, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. It's more common than not. So when you speak about cultural sensitivities, the smoking weed and drugs is kind of embedded within our culture. embedded in the sense that it's become more prevalent. It's not an isolated case. I mean, everybody knows somebody who's used. Everybody knows somebody who's using, and we know people who deal. And it's become something that's just we're so nonchalant and relaxed about that maybe we're not taking it as seriously as we should.
I think that there's a twofold situation there. I think that there is that to some extent where we're not taking it too seriously. But I think when we do take it seriously as well, we don't feel. Well, I know people who've used and who also sell. I don't think that they feel that they're supported. I think that they do turn to this. I think if you look at unemployment, there's nothing to turn towards. You know, if I've been to school where the students are driving to school in better cars than the teachers. Do you know what I mean? It's where you get that case
So are we just putting the priorities on the wrong things? Flashy car and bling jewelry, and that's as a status system, symbol means more than a good degree and a great education. I
think it's short-termism. I don't think it's even necessarily having a degree and going to university, because that's not the be-all and the end-all of everything. I think it's about moving away from short-termism and moving our mentalities away from the immediate in terms of reaching and striving to get now, rather than working to get it tomorrow. And I think that it's trying to find the middle ground between both of those. Well, I think it's a culture of instant gratification, isn't it? Yeah. You're watching Broken Silence. I'm Sanyya Gardez. We'll be back after this short break. Hi, welcome back to Broken Silence. I'm Sanyya Gardez. Today we're talking about drug abuse and gang violence and the prevalence of both within our Asian community. Joining me on the panel is Dilbar Dami from the Nishkam Center and Altaf Ghazi from the University of Birmingham. Just before we go any further, I just want to clarify, Altaf, I directed a question at you earlier about the Muslim community taking more responsibility for the heroin abuse in the UK, and I think my point is this, that because in the UK we're divided into communities that are primarily Muslim, primarily Sikh, primarily Hindu, that the people in that community often look to leaders of the mosque, of the Gurdwara, of the temple, for guidance and advice. So that's where I was going with that point. Dilbar, tell us a little bit about the Nishkam Center and your role there.
The Nishkam Center is a new breed of community development organization. It's very much Sikh-led. 2/3 of the funding for this 7 million project came from the pennies and 2 pences that people deposit in the Golak, in the Gurdwara. So it's very much a community-led organization. It's a centre that occupies what used to be a brownfield site, a completely derelict part of Handsworth.
Okay.
So a lovely £7 million project now sits on Soho Hill, attached next door to the Gurdwara, focusing very much on the kind of community development that I think our inner city communities desperately need.
What kind of projects are you undertaking or have undertaken?
We have a lovely building, and one of the projects that we introduced at an early stage was a well-being centre, which focuses very much on the kind of concept of Shanti and Tandrusti, peace of mind or positive mental health and physical well-being. And one of the reasons for setting up this absolutely wonderful facility was that we kind of felt that drugs and stress in society were a real kind of issue that really wasn't being grappled with. And what we wanted to do was to create some facilities that could positively provide some alternatives, as well as some real ways of living that were different from the usual.
So does the Nishkam Center, would somebody who was suffering from addiction come to a center like yours to get help?
I wish that were the case, but I think in reality, if we're dealing with the issue of supporting people who are suffering from an addiction, you've really got to have people who know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And centres like ours are not particularly well funded, so we're reliant on volunteers. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is that people who are suffering from one kind of drug addiction or another are not necessarily going to come to a spiritual centre
Well, that's what we've been talking about throughout the program. That people, youth, especially in our Asian community, when they find themselves in a situation where they have nobody else to turn to, they can't go to their parents, their friends are in the same boat as they are, they then don't have a community center, a religious group,